was chronic fatigue. I had bad eczema, severe depression and anxiety. I couldn't really do anything for a very long period of time and be able to keep breathing properly. I know at the time, I thought it was just built into me. That's what I was supposed to be like, and I was just doomed with that for the rest of my life. Everything after that first 2 weeks was just up and up. Pretty much became a person that I didn't think I was even capable of becoming, because it completely altered my attitude and my mood and my energy, seeing how my poor health was affecting people around me. But it was a drive from desperation to try to figure something out.
Okay, good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing? We have with us today Rance. Rance, good morning. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm actually doing quite well. It's good to have you here. So we're going to share your success story today. Rance, where are you located, if you don't mind sharing?
I'm living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. There's some good cattle production out in Oklahoma. That's a
Amen to that.
Nice place for that. I guess let's just get started here. Tell us a little bit about your background, and I guess we'll get into what was going on and how you figured it out.
Okay. I was born in Woodward, raised in Oklahoma City, been here all my life. And let's see. I guess right now I'm working part-time at a place driving an armored truck, so that's cool. But otherwise, my full-time is I'm actually a health coach, and I'm trying to get that carnivore word out there. But it wasn't until maybe fairly recently that I've been in health enough to do something like that.
What kind of issues were you having in the past?
As you may know, the list is pretty long. It was chronic fatigue. I had bad eczema. Severe depression and anxiety. I couldn't really do anything for a very long period of time and be able to keep breathing properly. I guess I had a lot of the symptoms of asthma. Never had it diagnosed. And I just had bad brain fog. My whole body ached all the time. I had pretty bad vertigo and fear of heights. Joint pain was pretty unbearable, the whole gambit.
And had you sought like medical care or treatment for any of these things in the past?
I did. I went to the doctor maybe 2 or 3 times, and all the times I went in, I let them know all the stuff that was going on. And funny enough, they chalked it up to just vitamin D deficiency. And so they prescribed vitamin D pills. And I took them for a time, but they really didn't make any difference at all.
Okay, so vitamin D deficiency, all these symptoms are associated with it. That's interesting because vitamin D does associate with a lot of things or deficiencies. But so vitamin D pills didn't work for you. How old were you when all this was going on? How old are you now?
I'm 30 right now, and this had been going on all throughout my youth. I think even as young as 10, I was having a lot of these issues, and my parents, and I don't hold it against them, they chalked it up to me being little and blowing things out of proportion, and they did worsen going into high school. I remember 8th grade going into 9th grade. I did have all these issues, and I left something out. I was pretty badly overweight. I just remember myself overflowing over my belt line, and these issues just got worse and worse. So I'd say, I guess the height of it was probably high school. So I was maybe 16, 17.
Okay, so overweight, eczema, anxiety, depression, pain in joints and things like that. I'm just interested because you think about it, why would a high school kid have anxiety and depression? It just seems, I know it's very common now, but any insight into what was going on with that? Did you kids are supposed to be happy generally. People in general are supposed to be happy. What do you think was going on there?
I know at the time, I thought it was just built into me. That's what I was supposed to be like, and I was just doomed with that for the rest of my life. But of course, looking back, I realize now one of the major cooking oils I used was canola oil. We'd use it by the container and we'd pour it in everything. And I was eating home cooked, but I'm sure that canola oil played a part based off of what I know now. And there were some other things going on. I was dealing with my mom going through cancer, which she'd had 3 times. And it just kept coming back because what I now know was a lot of lifestyle driven stuff going on there. But that was hard to deal with. And she also had bipolar disorder. She'd run away. And I had assumed that was the only thing that was contributing to my anxiety and depression at the time.
Yeah, you mentioned cooking oils and things like that. But what the diet growing up as a kid, was it this kind of normal, whatever, standard American diet stuff? Or is there any particular dietary strategy?
We we did center things around meat, so I think that's why I didn't go further downhill than I was going. But we always had 2 or 3 vegetables on the plate. There was always corn on the plate. And I remember a signature side, which might seem odd to a lot of folks, is my father would take a can of cream corn and pour it over a slice of whole wheat bread. And so that was something that was frequently in my diet that was probably contributing.
And you went to see physicians. They said it's a vitamin D deficiency. Did they talk outside of vitamin D supplementation? Because we get vitamin D from food and, of course, from sunlight as well. And did they talk to you about nutrition at all? Was that ever mentioned? Change your diet or look at diet or anything like that?
Never mentioned at all. They never looked at my lifestyle. They never asked what I was eating, and we never even did blood work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at what point did you start digging yourself out of this hole, or when did you decide, or how did you decide that you were going to go down a different path?
Okay, so that would be probably summer of 2019. That is when I actually stumbled across one of your videos, which led me to the Carnivore Diet. And I thought it was peculiar at the time. It, of course, went counter to everything that I'd been taught previously, because I was a certified personal trainer at the beginning of 2019. And I noticed that none of the stuff that I was taught in my textbook was actually helping anybody, and it wasn't helping me. And so I came across one of your videos talking about the Carnivore Diet, and I figured I'd give it a shot. It was a Hail Mary to me, because by that time I was married, and I do have a wife and daughter, and my symptoms, all my ailments were manifesting themselves in a really bad way that was hard on my family. And so that's what led me to go out and hunt for some kind of solution that wasn't being offered in the mainstream. And so I remember going out and getting a bunch of ground beef and eggs, and I kicked it off late 2019, and I never looked back.
So 2019, you start. So what happens? Do you notice anything right away? Did it take a while, or what was good, bad? What was the transition like?
Absolutely. I do remember what people call the keto flu, and it was pretty rough on me because I'd been living real bad prior to that. But one of the things that came first was mental clarity, and it was maybe within the first 7 days. And I was shocked. People at work really noticed it about me. And I noticed there were some moments just within that first 7 days that I was going into a scenario where I thought I was going to be anxious, and I was perturbed because there was just no anxiety there. I felt like I was waiting to get anxious, but I felt fine. And maybe 2 weeks later, that's when the keto flu symptoms dissipated. I wasn't having the rocket runs, as some people call it. I wasn't having my sleep even improved pretty quickly. And I remember reading a few people had posted on Reddit, and I was curious. I was digging more into the carnivore diet, and they had those symptoms last a lot longer, but I was pleasantly surprised that it went away pretty quickly for me. I recall also having a burning in the back of my head almost 24/7. And inflammation could have been the culprit there, but that went away. And it was such a foreign feeling to me. I almost felt cool in my head from that point forward. And I also noticed better flexibility. I was able to bend down a little further and get closer to touching my toes. Of course, one of the major things is I lost a ton of weight very quickly. I probably dropped 30 pounds in just the first month, and that was very noticeable at work. I had people curious about it, asking. The eczema on the back of my arms, it was almost prickly, and it went away. I would say maybe it was gone in 2 months' time, and that's something I'd had all my life. And I even had numbness and tingling in my hands and feet that went away. They'd just fall asleep when I was doing nothing, and this stuff just vanished. And that was all just within the first 3 months.
Yeah, it's good that you had a good result. So the people that noticed at work, did you tell them, hey, I'm just doing all this crazy carnivore thing, or how was that received?
I jumped right into it, and I did get some scrutiny from some folks. The number one being, man, your cholesterol must be horrible. But for the most part, people were very curious, and I didn't know enough about it at the time to really convey it well. But I did have a couple people jump on and try it with me, and they had similar results. And so I wasn't afraid to talk to people about it. I was already somebody that was outspoken about things as it is. So it wasn't out of character for me, but drove a lot of curiosity.
Now, was this because you said you part-time drive armored trucks? I think you said something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Was that where you were running into people when you were doing that?
Yeah, primarily there. I did have a few clients at home that were curious about it, but the conversations didn't continue there because I didn't feel like I was quite educated on it enough. But the folks at work, yes, it was while I was driving that armored truck, and they're an interesting crowd as it is, so they were on board.
Yeah, just the only thing I ever see is armored truck are these heist movies where the armored truck is getting robbed all the time. Sure, obviously it doesn't happen very often, or I would assume that's not something you often run into. I would imagine people trying to hold you up.
I guess I got lucky in the regard that we run incognito armored trucks, so they're not marked. So I watch those movies, but it doesn't get me too paranoid just based off of that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Interesting though. So you'd mentioned you'd had a little period with kind of loose stools for a bit. Any other that lasted for a short period of time. Have you had any other negatives since you've been doing this diet that you consider a negative?
None that I can bring to mind. Everything after that first 2 weeks was just up and up. I pretty much became a person that I didn't think I was even capable of becoming because it completely altered my attitude and my mood and my energy.
Yeah, I could repeatedly find people say that their mental health improves, or cognition, their ability to think clearly, their mood stabilizes, or happier. That's a pretty consistent finding, it seems to be. Any other sort of, some people just notice weird things like skin, nails, hair. I don't know. Any kind of weird revelations you've had since you've switched over?
I think all of those things. My beard was not as full as it is now, and I've trimmed it down, but I used to have a beard down to my chest, and people would notice that, and I attributed that to the Carnivore Diet, because before it was growing patchy and it was thin and it was I don't know, rough to the touch, but that and my nails grow faster. And something that I was not expecting at all was that my eyesight got better enough to notice. And I used to wear glasses. I get by plenty fine now without wearing glasses. So that was a shock. But skin as well. I used to get a lot of pimples when I was a teenager, and a lot of that carried on into my fairly recent adulthood, maybe the past 5 years, but now I don't get facial pimples anymore.
Yeah, the eyesight thing is also interesting, and I've seen a number of people report on that as well. It's nice. You can see better. It makes life a little easier. You got to worry about your glasses all the time. As far as what do you actually eat? That's always a question because some people have different sort of versions of what they call a carnivore diet. What does your diet look like?
For me, so it may have started out steak and eggs. There have been periods of time where I was just eating just steaks, and what I do is kind of the quote unquote Anthony Chafee method. I'll bulk buy up a bunch of chuck roast, and I'll cut that up, and I'll salt it, and I'll dry rack it, and then I'll just cook it in tallow or butter. And for the most part, that's maybe 95% of what I eat. But I have started bringing back in eggs because prior to carnivore, I actually got some kind of an allergic reaction to eggs, and that went away the further I got into this. So I've started bringing that back in, and periodically having liver, but for the most part, it's just fatty red meat and salt.
Yeah, it works pretty well. I mean, I do that. That's been much and most of my diet for years now, and it works quite well, in fact. And so the inevitable thing is, don't you miss pancakes and pizza and pasta and cookies and all that stuff? It's always because people like that couldn't imagine giving that stuff up. And did you have reservations on that? But like, how can I just eat a relatively monotonous diet without all these sort of other foods in there? How do you deal with that? Or what has been your experience with that?
I admit in the beginning, it did seem quote unquote restrictive, but I've always liked red meat a lot growing up. My dad was a farm boy. He was the first to break the farming tradition and go businessman, but I didn't have any problem with just eating a ton of meat and eggs. I will say I was full-blown addicted to rice, pasta, bread, the whole shebang. But as time went by, the cravings really just faded. And I also owe not missing those things or willing to be willing to take the leap to get those things out of my diet because of how horrible I felt going into this. I felt like I was spiraling going in. And if there was any chance that, the cinnamon rolls and chocolate and cake and stuff and bread, if there was any chance that removing that was going to fix these things because of how bad it was, I was ready to toss them.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes you have to have enough pain to realize that you don't want to live like that anymore. Family, supportive, unsupportive? What's the story with family members?
There's a long story with that. My in-laws, actually, everyone was against it in the beginning. They were warning my wife behind my back, he's probably going to die. Are you really going to let him do that? And she has been my teammate from the get-go. So she told him, no, he knows what he's doing. Just let him do it. And sure enough, everything's been fine. But even my dad was telling me, you're cutting out vegetables? And I told him, that's not carnivore if I keep the vegetables in. But my wife herself, she's been super supportive. She's actually on it with me now. And it's gotten rid of a lot of problems for her that she thought were just normal things to deal with as well. And my daughter, who's 8, she's always been excited about it. She likes her red meat. She loves her bacon and eggs, and she's on board as well.
Interesting. Okay. And obviously the inevitable question is cholesterol, obviously saturated fat and cholesterol, serum cholesterol are going to result in you dying of a heart attack earlier. Has it impacted that if you've checked it? And what are your thoughts around that?
So I've got some blood work coming up, but I haven't been able to get any done. I haven't experienced anything that would be in line with people saying that would cause me trouble or bring me to an early grave, because I've really been operating off of the idea that if I'm feeling better every day, surely that's not driving me into the ground faster. But I have had people concerned about that. And I have referred to information that you've put out and a lot of other people in our space, people like Paul Mason that break it down as well. And that alleviates the concerns for me and a lot of the people around me that are watching or partaking in carnivore.
Yeah, we just had a long discussion with a guy, Dr. David Diamond, yesterday on this topic for about 2 hours, talking about the concerns around elevations in cholesterol, what that may or may not mean. And so, like I said, I think it's more nuanced than what a lot of people believe. As far as, like you said, you lost a bunch of weight, your inflammation went down. I don't know if you're checking blood pressure, if it was ever an issue for you. I assume it's probably normal now if you've checked it. But so a lot of those risk factors, traditional cardiovascular risk factors, have been minimized. And whether or not your cholesterol has gone up or not, well, I guess you'll have to wait to see. And then you have to figure out what you're going to do with that once you get to that situation. But let me ask you about, so you said you're doing some health coaching, you're still doing the armored car stuff. How hard is it for you, Day, to implement your diet? Do you find, is it challenging? Is it expensive? A lot of people say, I can't do this because it's too expensive. What have been your thoughts around that?
I actually, as time goes by, I find it easier just because of what I'm learning about what you can do in terms of fast food hacks. But I do get that concern from people as well. I have found it to be extremely affordable to just go with ground beef, but even the chuck steak, the chuck roast method, if you bulk buy it from Sam's Club or Costco, that covers somebody like me that's fairly high activity for 6 weeks. And if you break it down, you're still spending, I would say, less than the average family spends if they're going grocery shopping every weekend overall. But eggs have been a friend, especially in the past when things have been tight. I try to go for the best quality of eggs, but I've always talked to my family about this and with other people that even the lowest quality eggs are better than the highest quote unquote quality processed foods. And so boiled eggs on the go have been great. Bacon in tin foil at work is great. And there have been periods of time where if I was in a rush, I'd throw a stick of butter in the lunch pail and take that, and I would be just fine. And it wasn't breaking the bank at all. Yeah.
Most people that I've come into contact with have said that because they eliminate so much other food, and particularly like food that gets wasted in many cases, like the organic fruits and vegetables that often end up in the trash, they are able to save money ultimately on this. So it works out pretty well. And you eat, what, twice a day, something like that? What's your meal frequency?
Twice a day on average, but there are a lot of times I eat once a day. I'm just not hungry and I don't crave anything, but I'll usually work maybe a 10 or 11 hour day, get home and have my meal, and that really suffices. Occasional breakfast.
You'd mentioned you discovered some like fast food hacks and things like that. So what are those for people that might have an interest in that?
I found that especially when we're on road trips or something, we can swing by places, I don't know, McDonald's or Burger King, but just not get the bun. I'll just order a bunch of patties and we'll bring our salt along with us. We bring Redmond real salt with us and we'll put that on top of it. But that's one of our hacks. And that kind of goes for a lot of burger places. I know we've swung by Five Guys before, but that pretty much solves the problem getting from point A to point B.
Yeah, usually even the smallest towns have at least have one little burger stand. There's something there, and you can always seem to get burger patties pretty reliably. I think I tried to do Five Guys one time. Five Guys, and they were reluctant to do burger patties. I don't know if maybe they've changed their policy now, but it's been years since I've tried that. But yeah, I often do that in an airport. We go to an airport, and there's usually a hamburger place, somebody selling hamburgers, and just get it without the bun, and works pretty darn easy. Do you have an online, because you're doing health coaching, do you have an online presence now or like social media type stuff?
I do somewhat. I've been on Instagram and Facebook. I started up a little website, but that's really as far as that goes. With Instagram has been the biggest thing. I guess that's where I say people that are sharing the carnivore diet seem to get the most success and followers from what I've seen.
Do you find that you get a lot of, certainly my social media is obviously very pro eating meat and carnivore, and I get not a lot, but I get some negative comments from mostly vegans and stuff like that. But do you get much of that?
I do get a lot of that. I get a lot of direct messages, really. Sometimes I get an unruly person in the comments saying something along the lines of, there's no way you're going to convince me that meat is better for you than fruit or more nutrient dense. But I get a lot of messages from people sending me the foods that I don't eat anymore, pictures of it as if it is tempting. And frankly, I can look at it and I just don't crave it. It doesn't register as food to me anymore. But I have gotten some blowback, specifically vegans trying to report things, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Well, a little bit, enough to note.
Yeah. You said you're in Oklahoma, which is the heart of beef country. And I would imagine that's a place where you don't get a lot of people pushing for bugs and soybean diets. Is that fair to say in Oklahoma?
I would say for the most part, but because I live close to downtown OKC, you do get some of that. I do know a lot of vegans that live in the heart of downtown, and they give me funny looks when I walk by because they know what I'm doing. But for the most part, I mean, I've got no shortage of friends that share my love of beef here.
Yeah, and as you said, when you source your meat, are you trying to get only grass-finished beef, or do you get grain-finished beef, or what do you prefer?
Currently, I'm getting predominantly grain-finished. I do like supporting local farmers, but I haven't noticed any big difference in the health benefits that come from eating the grain-finished. I do enjoy the occasional grass-fed, grass-finished, but for the most part, I am eating grain-finished.
Yeah, it's been pretty much my experience. It doesn't seem to make much of a difference for people. You can just pick whatever you want. You said your wife has now started on this. How long did she observe you? Because you said 2019 is when you started. How long was she watching before she made the plunge?
She probably watched for about a year. And I'm sure even though she didn't tell me, she was a little bit concerned or reluctant to just have me go running down this road, but it was just undeniable everything that changed about me. And that is what brought her over in about a year's time, because it's like I was a different, better person every day, and she loved everything about it.
Yeah, good for you. Obviously, the people that are critical of this will say it's only because you just gave up processed food and you could do the same thing with a whole food balanced diet, and there's no reason to go so extreme. What are your thoughts on that sort of?
I do have a little bit of a personal experience there. There was a period of time before I started carnivore that I was doing plant-based keto, and I was eating a ton of salad, and I did not feel really any better in my personal experience eating a bunch of salad, even when I was cutting out stuff like chocolate and Pop-Tarts, that whole food keto or that plant-based keto was still, it wasn't letting my symptoms and my issues subside. And so I do think a lot of my deficiencies, which there were a lot of symptoms to indicate this, were only curable by something more nutrient dense, such as red meat. And I don't think I was going to be able to get that from just cramming a bunch of veggies down my throat.
Yeah. And plus the meat tastes a lot better in my opinion. Anyway,
Amen.
It's like, it's kind of like far better than that. What has been, I guess, as far as the benefits you've got, you said you lost weight, you lost the eczema. What do you think for you is the main reason you stay on this diet?
I would say the top reason, as general as it is, I just feel amazing. I'm sitting at 170 right now, which I want to pump that number back up, but that number hasn't fluctuated in so long. I've never had to care about how much I really eat or what I eat. It's the same thing for the most part every day, and I don't crave anything else, but I feel great.
Yeah, so it's very simple. It's not, a lot of people are stressed out about their diet where they're calculating everything, and it's just, it makes it easy. And you think about every other sort of species of animal on the planet, and they don't really put much thought into their diet, I don't think. And I haven't seen them checking apps or wearing Fitbits and things like that. Yeah, certainly that is, and the ease for that. Some people will get to a point where they're like, I want to experiment with adding in fruit or whatever it might be. Are you at that point where you want to do that? Have you done that? Do you have any desire to do that?
I don't have much desire from this point going forward. There have been moments where I brought back in some kind of low carb plant or low carb fruit like blueberries, and it had the same result every time. I ended up, even if it was just a handful of blueberries, I would feel lethargic in the evening, and then I would notice just my sleep wasn't quite as good. And so just those results, I can trying anything else at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Like all those people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's no reason to fix it, right? If you're doing well. And that's great. Do you, as far as you said, you lost at least 30 pounds, right? Maybe more. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. So my heaviest was 260, and that was ninth grade. And so I'm sitting at 170 now. It was a pretty substantial amount.
Okay. So you're 90 pounds down from your top weight. That's pretty good. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
As far as you said, you're wanting to put on some size now. Are you trying to get to the gym and put on some muscle?
I am. So I've noticed that whenever I do work out, the weight comes back on pretty quickly. And I hate to attribute not going to the gym to life circumstances, but with the way the last year's been, it's been a little bit difficult. But I know when I start going to the gym, it's noticeable. I feel great in the gym. My endurance is a lot better than it used to be, because there was a time period as well where I was 215 and I looked pretty good. I looked bulky and looked muscly. There wasn't a lot of definition, but I think there was a lot of fluff to that. It wasn't real lean muscle. It wasn't real strength. But I do plan to put it back on, and I know it comes on because every time I go for a month or two consistently, for the most part, I don't feel like I have to change my eating other than maybe frequency. If I'm hungry, I eat, and that solves the problem, and I put some muscle on.
Yeah, that's certainly nice to be able to put on muscle when you need to. And it's, I think, one of the things with the diet, such high quality protein certainly facilitates that as long as you get enough calories in there. I think that's really and then doing the training. Do you foresee, well, you said you have one kid. Are you guys looking at more maybe at some point? Or what's the story there?
I think we're keeping the number at one, just maybe for simplicity's sake, because she is definitely an adult trapped in an 8-year-old's body. But we're just sticking at one, but she is in phenomenal condition.
Okay, good for you. Yeah, that's nice. And do you have any, like I said, before, what would have been your favorite food prior to this?
Oh, man. Huh. Well, that's a long list, too. That's hard to bring down. But before Carnivore, I was a big, and this is horrible, I was a big McDonald's chicken nuggets person. I'd get a 50 piece and then a 6-pack of beer. And that would be a meal favorite somehow. I can't even fathom it where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's interesting how, and even though chicken nuggets technically are meat, they're pretty low quality and they're pretty bad food for most people, I'd say, for everybody, quite honestly. You said you sometimes still go to McDonald's and get the burger patties. When you walk in there and most of the people that are in there look generally pretty unhealthy, but if you look what they're eating, almost none of them are just eating burger patties. They're all eating the fries and they have a big Coke and maybe they have a hamburger, but I'm sure you've seen that now. Do you go, like when you go out and about, grocery store, restaurant, shopping mall, whatever, and you see all the people around, is it ever, particularly at the grocery store, because you see what people are putting in their cart, do you ever like go, wait, look at that and think, my gosh, if you just change what you're eating, you'd be better? Does that ever come to your mind?
I'd say that's my most frequent thought when I'm out and about. It's a shocker. Even my daughter, I've taught her a lot about nutrition in the past couple of years. She actually took a picture with Mama's phone one day of somebody's shopping cart, and it was just jam-packed full of soda and Oreos and chips. And it's a heartbreaker because I think they just don't know. And that kills me. But that's a thought that I have all the time.
Yeah, I often think about what does it take to get people to change their behavior? And so from your perspective, you just got to a point where you're like just frustrated, right? You're fed up with your health. No one came up to you and said, hey, you need to change this or that. It was something you internally decided. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. That's absolutely fair to say. And I guess being somebody that's pretty empathetic, seeing how my poor health was affecting people around me, but it was a drive from desperation to try to figure something out.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. There's people telling you to go plant-based, or people tell you the Mediterranean diet. There's obviously people telling carnivore now. You know, what I guess your advice to somebody that's maybe they've made up their mind that they're sick of being sick. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say, at least in my personal opinion, I think it's better to just rip that Band-Aid off, because I don't think there's any benefit from just dragging out feeling horrible. To just get some meat and start eating it until you're full. That's exactly what I did, and I see successful for so many other people.
Yeah, so you mean, and when I wrote my book and I talked to people about just eat meat like it's your job for a while, and that kind of is. It's just trying to get healthy and getting rid of those. How long did it take for you at what point, if ever, did you realize that I no longer am maybe addicted to this garbage food? What point during the journey did you realize, hey, I'm over this stuff?
I will say it probably took me about 6 months into this to really get rid of that craving. Up until that point, it was more focusing on what I knew was going to happen if I continued to eat it. But at about 6 months, I remember they brought a ton of donuts to work, and they like to give out a bunch of free donuts. And I looked at it and I thought, that just doesn't seem appealing to me. And I had no draw to it.
Yeah, that's got to be a freeing experience. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I felt freer than I'd ever been at that point.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are critical of saying it's a restrictive diet, but at the same time, it's freeing to be out of the spell of food addiction, whether it's subtle. I admit many of us are reluctant to admit it, but like I said, it's tough. These things are they're very much like drugs in a way. It's like a delicate drug. We just have a little bit of that.
Absolutely.
A little bite of something sweet and I'm good. And then it turns into more than one bite. Many bites.
I hear that. I was a binger.
Yeah. You said your wife is on board, your kiddo's doing it somewhat. Is there still like food in the house you have to say, I can't have this, or do you pretty much eliminate all that from the house?
We've tossed most of it out. There was a point maybe a year ago where these things did have a draw for my wife and daughter, but they're the ones that recognized that having it there was dangerous. It was like holding a match to gasoline. And so we ended up just throwing a lot of it away. There's maybe a handful of things that kind of fall under the keto umbrella, but even those things are probably going to end up in the garbage.
Yeah. Okay. And it does simplify it when you don't have the temptation there. I tell people if you get it out of your house, you're less likely to eat it, right? Of course, now we have these alternative Uber Eats and whatever. You can just DoorDash, you get crap delivered to your house, unfortunately, and it's just facilitating this addiction that people have, and these companies do well with that. They make a lot of money on that, on your and I's addictions, unfortunately. You said you're trying to get more, I guess you're doing some health coaching, you're getting more into that. What has been your experience with that so far?
So far, there is no shortage of people around me that you can tell to some extent are metabolically damaged. And most people are very receptive. I think once I get somebody's attention, they're really interested because first off, it's just something that's so counter to everything they've heard. Even if they're against it, that curiosity of the unknown drives them to stick around. And I would say it's people that do jump on board. It's 100% success rate. This is something that I've never experienced before in the traditional personal training realm. But everybody that jumps on, they're always a little skeptical. They get on board, but they shed weight and they won't stop blowing my phone up after that, which is a good problem to have. But it's been a good experience. I have had a lot of people call it a contradiction to be a health coach and somebody that promotes carnivore. But again, just digging into the information, the literature, being able to break things down and explain them gets my credibility up, because their initial only argument is that the science doesn't support that. And what's science? Because there's becoming an overwhelming amount of evidence out there that this stuff works. And other than just epidemiological or just looking at people. But yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting.
Since 2019, since we're almost through 2023 now, so over 4 years, have you noticed sort of a greater penetration of carnivore, and do more people have they heard about it now? Is it less? Do you find more people, I know a guy doing that, or does it seem like they've never heard of it before?
A funny thing, and I have seen it grow. And the aha moment for noticing that was we let this solar panel salesman talk us into getting solar panels put on, and he was carnivore. And so that I'd never run into that really before. And then after that, it only got more frequent. I had friends from high school or people I'd met at previous jobs coming out of the woodwork, sometimes sharing your post to me saying, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually shared that too." But a lot of people are open to the idea. I think even the people that I've known all my life that were more leaning towards vegetarian or looking at giving it a shot. So maybe they're hitting that inevitable point where that's not working for them. But I definitely see it more in my immediate lifestyle surrounding and on social media. So I think it's picking up some steam.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I know when I travel, I almost always run into people that recognize me or are familiar with carnivore, and it's definitely growing, which is, I think, a good thing that more people have access to it and can try it and see if it works for them. Maybe it doesn't work for everybody, but certainly works for a lot of people, which is a really good thing. Do you, as far as, because you said you're what, 30, you said 31, I think you said you were?
Just 30.
30, yeah, so young, a lot of life ahead of you, hopefully. People will say that this is a short-term fix. You can't do it long-term. Obviously, the whole concern around heart disease and so on and so forth. What are your thoughts? Are you like, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life, or you keep it open to whatever happens? What are your thoughts on that?
So it is something I do plan to maintain the rest of the foreseeable future. And my mindset that has always supported that is I'm just going to go where the true clean evidence takes me. And I'm confident that it's going to continue me down this path. But I do get a lot of folks telling me that you're only 30, so that's why you're not dying yet. And then I bring up to them, I've been in worse health than probably a lot of 80-year-olds, and doing this has made all of those issues go away. By that token, it can't be that bad for me. But I do plan to stay on this the rest of my life, and I think my family's right there with me.
When because you mentioned you felt like your health was equivalent to some 80-year-olds. If you could 1 to 10, 10 being the best, what was your quality of life whenever 5 years ago, and then what is it now? How would you compare those?
I would probably put it at a 2 back then, and because every day is a little bit better for me, I would say I'm at a 10 today, and it just keeps getting better.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. And do you, as far as your abilities to function, has it changed your outlook on life, ambition-wise, things like that from previous to now?
Absolutely. There are things I'm doing now that I think even me just 5 years ago wouldn't believe. Starting my own business was something that I think I feared or never would have even thought of back then. I do find that my capacity for, I would say, kindness and connecting with people has increased quite a lot. And I think that's also because I'm not clouded and I'm not in constant pain. So I have that freedom to be who I think I was intended to be.
Yeah, fair enough. That's great. Anything else you want to share? We're getting close on time here. Anything else we didn't get to talk about? Any other thing you wanted to share to the general people that might be listening?
There is one thing, and it's more of a sharing the good news type of deal. But when I was talking about myself, I didn't mention that my dad is 81, and he has always gotten around better than anybody else, even in the 50-year-old category. But maybe a year ago, he came back from Africa, and he started eating standard American diet again, and it landed him in type 2 diabetes range. He had hypertension. And our doctors here actually recommended that he start doing something plant-based. And it only got worse. And he started acting his age. And he ended up with atrial fibrillation. And I had a hard talk with him and told him, here's what I've been doing. You watch me do it. It's been great for me. And in the first 5 days of him trying it, his hypertension was gone. He had the same blood pressure in essence as I did. And throughout the 30 days that he did, he's actually still doing it now, but within the first 30 days, pretty much everything was fixed. And he went in to see the doctor. And I told him, maybe don't tell him what you're doing because he's going to try to steer you away, even though things are positive. But his doctor didn't need to see him again for 6 months when they had been doing checkups every 2 weeks. And so that was pretty, I would say, what people would call miraculous. But to what I know, I just think it was inevitable.
Yeah, it goes to show you that really any age can benefit from this. I've seen it multiple times and many people in their 80s now. So that's good to do. All right. I'll tell you, you said you had an Instagram. Do you mind sharing your social media where people can go to find out more?
Sure. It's just Rance_full spectrum human. That's where they can find me.
Rance_full spectrum human on Instagram, right?
Yes, sir.
That's an interesting title. Good for you, man. Well, anyway, thank you for sharing your story and good luck, continued success. And hopefully your dad continues to do well and the rest of the family. And thanks for sharing that. I'm sure it'll help other people out. And for the rest of the folks, you guys, see you tomorrow, or otherwise, if not, you guys have a great weekend. Take care, everybody.